In the past few months, I've seen a lot of Nostalgia Critic critiques posted on this very website, mostly lambasting him for his quality of content, and rightly so. A lot of the focus seems to be on his movie To Boldly Flee, which I can safely say is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. It's overly long, boring, tedious, unfunny, awkward, horribly directed and acted, terribly written, and full of itself, and it demands every piece of criticism that it's received. However, people seem to forget that there was a spiritual sequel to TBF, and even with a far shorter runtime, it's just as bad. Of course, I'm talking about The Review Must Go On, which welcomed the Nostalgia Critic back into the landscape of online video in the most pretentious way possible. We're breaking down what didn't work about this short film, why it was made in the first place. We're also going to look at what the Nostalgia Critic has been up to since then. I'm not looking forward to any of this. Just in case you're not familiar with To Boldly Flee or you need a quick refresher, I'm going to run through what happened in the movie in a hopefully quicker manner than the movie is able to relay any single piece of its plot. All you need to know is that To Boldly Flee was a movie that Doug Walker, who is the man behind the Nostalgia Critic, wrote and directed in 2012, which saw all the Channel Awesome producers band together not only to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the site, but also fight back against a galaxy-threatening plot hole. Basically, the rest of the plot doesn't matter. The 3-hour and 29-minute movie, what? 3 hours and 29 minutes? That's 2 minutes longer than Seven Samurai, and people actually like that movie. Throws 5 million references at you instead of actually writing its own plot or jokes or characters or anything fucking original, and then the Nostalgia Critic dies at the end. That's all you need to know. Essentially, Doug decided he didn't want to do Nostalgia Critic anymore, so he wrote a 3.5-hour love letter to himself. Pretty cool stuff. Of course, with his flagship show and main source of income ending, Doug needed something else to bring people to the site, and also something that would cement himself as an artist who was much more than a guy who reviewed movies from his childhood. Enter Demo Reel. If you've never seen or heard Demo Reel, good for you. I'm happy for you. Really, I am. Your life is that much better than mine for not knowing what this disaster of a show is. For this review, I'd only ever seen maybe one episode, and I'm not sure if I even saw it in its entirety. So, before I started this review, I rewatched the Dark Knight episode, and let's just say this show is not even slightly worth talking about. Think about every shitty spoof movie you've ever seen. Epic movie, date movie, superhero movie. Basically, Demo Reel is all of those, but starring Doug Walker and on the internet. The best thing about it is that it's free. But seriously, after watching the show, I can't say that's much of an advantage. Demo Reel is full of awful jokes, awful directing, awful writing, and especially awful satire. Every joke is just a reference to a different, better film that you would much rather be watching, with maybe a word just changed from an actual line from those better movies.
What are we gonna do?
The only thing we can do.
Who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters.
Who are you?
I guess the idea behind the show is okay and could work, as it's about a filmmaker who remakes films but only far, far worse. But if you look back at the whole of Doug Walker's career and the quality of the recent Nostalgia Critic episodes, the whole show feels far more on the nose than it was obviously intended. Demo Reel was originally intended to be the hot new show for Channel Awesome, the show that was supposed to be the reason people flocked to the site and then checked out the other producers, much like the original NC did. It wasn't. Nobody watched Demo Reel. Nobody liked Demo Reel. It was a 100% failure, and Channel Awesome began to hurt because of it. Less and less people were visiting the site, which meant that less people were watching the other producers, and the other producers were especially hurt by this because most of the reviewers on the site were only employees with CA in name only. Their payment from the site was exposure, and when nobody is coming to the site, that payment doesn't really hit like it used to. Something had to be done. The site could not and would not go on like this, and thus, behind the scenes, the decision to bring back the Nostalgia Critic was made. But in order to spice things up and hype up and hopefully bring back fans, the decision was also made not to announce the Nostalgia Critic coming back in a short video or statement, or just bring him back unceremoniously. No, that wasn't enough for a character as lauded and beloved. He thinks he's beloved as the Nostalgia Critic. He needed more, and more he gave himself in a 32-minute long return special entitled The Review Must Go On. Yes, to bring back the Nostalgia Critic, an internet character who reviews movies from his childhood with a voice that sounds like a hyena with its balls stepped on.
What's with this idiot and numbers? What, first how many people die, now how many kids he has? I mean, what the fuck's wrong with
you!
Doug Walker and Company made a 32-minute return special that acts as both a sequel to To Boldly Flee and as a finale for Demo Reel. Herein lies the first major issue I have with the special, is that it tries to do too much while also doing absolutely nothing, while also feeding into Doug's ego at the same time. I guess that's 3 issues I have with this goddamn special, but these 3 issues are so interconnected to each other to a point where it's impossible not to talk about one while you're talking about another. It's not really one of those things like some movies where the film doesn't know what it wants to be, so it tries to be everything at once. Think Suicide Squad or Justice League, which feel more like Frankenstein monsters than actual films. This short film's plot is pretty bare bones, but at least you know what's happening. Basically, just to give you a better idea of what actually happens, Doug has to decide if he's going to bring back the Nostalgia Critic or not and end Demo Reel. He plays around in both the world of Demo Reel, having weird shit happen to his character Donnie, and in Doug's own world, where he has visions of the NC all around his ugly-ass house. Seriously, look at the goddamn walls. I fucking hate his house. At the end, Doug decides to bring back the Nostalgia Critic, essentially killing the Demo Reel world, having it be so that Donnie was actually the Nostalgia Critic the whole time. Just in the plot hole. A holdover plot point from To Boldly Flee. I never said the story was award-winning, I just said that it was clear what was happening. To its benefit, and it pains me to say this, the review must go on does know what it is and what it's trying to achieve. And it sets itself up to achieve its goals quite nicely, having clear differences and purposes of its 2 worlds, that of Demo Reel and that of Doug's real world. The only issue with this is that what it's trying to achieve is making Doug Walker's ego as big as possible, as cringy as possible, something that I noticed when I rewatched the special. It acts like you're a big fan of Doug's work and like you've seen everything he's ever done. All of the Nostalgia Critic episodes, the anniversary movies, and yes, Demo Reel, which on paper isn't exactly a bad idea. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe relied on this tactic too. It's not really that crazy or that terrible of an idea. It's okay to assume your fans have followed your work and enjoyed all of it. What isn't okay is acting like what you've made is God's gift to Earth that everyone in the world has seen or should see. Multiple references are made in the beginning to events and characters of Demo Reel that just make you want to reach out to Doug, slap him in the face, and say, no one watched Demo Reel.
You never heard of a woman named Rebecca Stone who did a one-woman Titanic, beat a turkey to death, and wears a shirt that says Malkovich equals balls?
There are multiple references to Nostalgia Critic videos, even in the Demo Reel section, and constant highlight reels of the Nostalgia Critic that are meant to make you feel, nostalgic for Doug's previous work, but in reality only serve to make you go, wow, Doug is a cool guy. I wish I were Doug. Let's talk about Doug's ego and only his ego for just a little bit. One of the major parts that only exacerbates the issue of Doug's inflated ego throughout the short film are the constant calls throughout the special for the Nostalgia Critic to come back. And when I say constant, I mean insistently insane, constant calls for the Nostalgia Critic to come back. Doug hears voices telling him to come back.
Come back.
His friends start slipping up and saying things that sound like they want him to bring the critic back.
First things first, all our hopes rest on the Nostalgia Critic. People will love that.
What did you say?
I said all our hopes rest on nostalgia. Critics love that.
He makes a mention of all the emails he's gotten asking for the critic to come back.
Yeah. But I made a choice, you know, and it just felt like it was the right time to go.
Your fans didn't seem to think so.
Oh, did they notice? The ass number of emails asking the critic to come back didn't seem to tip me off.
Come back is written a million times in their script and on creepy whiteboards. Doug even envisions the Nostalgia Critic as a real person in and outside the computer who is clamoring to bring back himself. Doug acts as if his absence is some sort of slight to the entire film world, like something was missing when he left his role as the Nostalgia Critic. But in reality, he was a guy who reviewed old movies who didn't want to review movies anymore. It's not that deep, Doug. God! Something that was lost on me when I was younger, but that now seems really apparent as I've grown older, is the role the producers who cameo in this play in Doug furthering his ego. Linkara, Todd in the Shadows, Brad Jones, aka Cinema Snob, and Lindsay Ellis all show up to consult and listen to Doug pontificate about whether he should bring back his most lucrative IP or not. For this section, I'm really only going to be talking about Linkara and Lindsay Ellis' moments though, as they're the only ones who have somewhat meaningful conversations with Doug about the Nostalgia Critic, as Todd's appearance is mostly paid for, albeit shitty, laughs, and Brad Jones is a scab. Linkara's encounter with Doug starts off fine enough. They talk about whether or not Doug should bring back the Nostalgia Critic, the different routes he can go down, etc. But then Linkara says something crucial that just really shows off how important Doug thinks the Nostalgia Critic is.
Well, that's why it's your choice. Bottom line, if you feel there's still potential and you can keep it going for a long time, bring him back. But if you think you only have enough for once in a while, just keep it once in a while and go out on top.
Go out on top? What is there to go out on exactly? Doug's reviews have essentially stayed the same over the years, even with the demo-realized nature of Nostalgia Critic 2.0. And he makes reviews of movies, not actual movies. So this line has me astounded ever since I heard it again. But as astounding as this line is to me, the interaction between Lindsay Ellis, who I adore, and Doug, who I really hate, is even worse and has underlying implications that honestly make me wonder about the way Doug viewed his fellow producers when they were still on the site. The whole tone and context of this conversation, which really only takes a minute or two in the runtime, but it feels like it lasts for at least 30 minutes, just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. One that gets worse and worse the more I think about it and the more I watch. This scene feels like it's made specifically to make you think that Lindsay Ellis is an angry, jealous person who doesn't want her friend to come back into the limelight. And it just feels gross because you know Lindsay Ellis doesn't care to be there, and you know Doug Walker thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. This whole interaction is just weird to me. Like, first of all, Doug makes a shitty joke about taking a ton of tranquilizers, which sadly doesn't seem to affect him.
Are you chewing on something?
Tranquilizers. I've taken enough to kill a baby rhinoceros.
He begins asking Lindsay questions, and I have to say, it's so obvious that she doesn't want to film this that I just respect her even more. Her acting is so dry and dejected.
Well, that's a great way to start off a conversation. Okay, what? What?
That I can't help but think that she probably thought she was done filming stuff for Doug, anniversary movie or otherwise, forever. And that having to film for this special, even with it being on her own time in her own apartment, is a new kind of demoralizing. Also, Doug acts like because he left his stead as the Nostalgia Critic, the only person who can review nostalgic movies now is Lindsay Ellis, and that she has final say on his return.
I mean, I know it won't be entirely impartial seeing how nostalgic movies are now your domain and everybody comes to you for them, but I trust you on this, and I want your honest opinion. If
you grew up watching Nostalgia Critic and any others, there's this running idea that if somebody reviews something another producer might have already covered, it's worse than murder.
Ferngully, the last rainforest. And boy, have I got some words to say about...
Hey!
What? What was that?
That was me, you plagiarist!
Nostalgia chick? What the hell do you want?
You can't make fun of Ferngully. I was gonna make fun of that.
Hey, too bad, chick. I got dibs.
Just the sheer idea that because somebody has already reviewed something, that someone else might not have anything new to say, which goes hand in hand with this idea that Doug can't review nostalgic movies anymore because it's now Lindsay's domain, as if Lindsay could only ever review nostalgic movies, to me is just sheer lunacy. Doug just makes me so uncomfortable in everything he does, and this only makes it worse. I feel like that's the recurring feeling of this return special. Uncomfortability, especially with the benefit of time and being a couple years removed from the Not So Awesome documents. There's just so many things in here that make me question the behind the scenes aspects. Obviously, I mentioned the cameos by the producers earlier, and all the moments where it's obvious Doug is inflating his own ego like a balloon on helium. But there's moments in this that make me genuinely wonder what the fuck happened that day on set. Like, I wonder if the cast of Demo Reel knew they were coming back for the Nostalgia Critic before shooting this episode, or if they were told after. This might seem kind of random and not really worth talking about, but seeing as the producers who participated into Boldly Flea didn't receive scripts until extremely close to the shoot date, which meant they didn't know the Nostalgia Critic was being written off until shooting, which meant that they didn't know whether they still had a job or not prior to shooting. I think it's something to ponder over. I would not put it past Doug to announce that he's bringing his old show back, which was a largely one-person affair, and not tell his cast whether he was bringing them back or not until filming on the first Nostalgia Critic back commenced. Now, it might seem like I'm pro new cast, and all I can say is I'm not. For a variety of different reasons, I'm not a fan of the new cast. Some of them, not their fault. Some of them, yeah, it's their fault. But the main reason I'm not a fan of the new cast being brought back to Nostalgia Critic 2.0 is that bringing back the cast essentially combines the Nostalgia Critic with Demo Reel, creating an amorphous hybrid of incompetence and idiocracy. And the seeds are laid here in this episode, which really bogs down the whole thing and makes you ask, was this necessary? I shit you not. The NC and Doug, which in this are two different people, sit down at a kitchen table and discuss whether or not the Nostalgia Critic is allowed to review newer movies or not. Yes, apparently in the world of the Nostalgia Critic, you're not only not allowed to review movies somebody else has reviewed before, or even allowed to review older movies, you have to sit down and have a talk with yourself about the things you are allowed to review as well as your schedule.
Some ground rules.
Fair enough.
Reviews every 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Maybe every other week I can do a mini review or a film editorial, but if we still want these jokes to still be fresh and funny, I need more time on them, and that's going to be 2 weeks.
This all just feels like it could have happened in a 2-minute long announcement video. Maybe you could have had a short sketch or a funny joke or something, but man, acting like a movie critic, returning to critiquing movies after he said he would no longer critique movies, is deserving of an epic tale of one man's ego is obscene. It's not like he's setting up the world of Inception. He's basically combining Demo Reel, the show he'd much rather be wasting our time with the Nostalgia Critic, the show that he's been wasting our time with for 7 years, with reviews like this, and of course, most of all, this. I always remembered the Alice in Wonderland episode as being the episode that the demo realization of the Nostalgia Critic began with, but man, rewatching these episodes made me realize that it started even earlier than that. Doug has been combining aspects of these shows together for years now, which means he's been making shitty fan films that espouse nonsensical critiques of films for almost a third of my life, and I remember and watched most of it. Existence is pain. Before I conclude this video, I want to go through a list of the things that bothered me about it, that just seemed too small and dumb and nitpicky to have their own section, but maybe they're funny and interesting enough to at least mention in passing. First of all, the cinematography in this is just fucking annoying. The classic, look up at Doug like he's God shots are all here, as expected, and there's all these little movements that seem to serve no purpose, and just the sheer wistful nature of them make me want to throw the camera on the ground and beat this shit like that scene from Office Space. Doug still really doesn't know how to light anything. There's parts of this that look almost grainy and dated, and shots that are so oversaturated in light that even a black and white filter make it hard to look at the screen. Bringing back the plot hole in this is just really stupid to me because there's no inkling at all throughout Demo Reel that the plot hole is the reason why Donnie is who he is in that show, which makes it essentially a retcon of this, which feels like something Doug himself would criticize in a film, yet he's just casually doing it here and relying on you to have sit through his 3.5 hour long movie as well as his 6-episode failed monstrosity. Per usual, Doug overacts and oversqueals his voice. I'm just going to show you a compilation of his terrible acting in this because goddamn talking about it is going to make me a madman.
So are we doing this?
Yeah, I just need to get some coffee.
That's water.
So it is. Okay, I'm with you. A Carmen Sandiego movie? Cool, I like it. This tastes like microwave Baileys. Quit!
It's not Bailey's, it's Yoo-Hoo.
No, wait. If you go out there, you could disappear just like everyone else. When did he grow the goatee? He didn't have a goatee before! Everything's topsy-turvy! It's an upside-down world! I guess you weren't out drinking with Quinn, then! I think I'm gonna have myself committed.
Oh, I see. Plant in the back and see if a real movie grows, huh?
Screw you!
This movie should be studied! I mean, it's just, they thought this is how people would act! This is how people would act! It's not! That's not how anybody would act! They would donate that kid to science!
I got a bit of a question for you.
Do you honestly want me to come back?
Yes.
Also, Doug's house is ugly as fuck and I still can't get over it. One last thing, after watching this episode multiple times for this review, it makes me wonder, what's gonna happen when Doug actually retires? Like, I'm not talking about like retiring the show again for another new thing, because I doubt that Doug will do anything but this for the rest of his life. I'm talking more about what's gonna happen when Doug is 60 or 70 years old and he just retires from working. I mean, I have no idea what the world will even be like then, of course. We might just have no movies at all and live in a Fahrenheit 451 style world, which would either make the NC obsolete or the most important man in the world like Doug always wanted. But let's just say that sometime in the future, Doug retires from public life and the Nostalgia Critic as a whole. Is there going to be another special? Will someone else in the cast take up the head and tie, like the Falcon in Endgame taking the shield from an old Captain America? Will they pick a new person to play the role and have a body morphing situation like Doctor Who? I guess this is all sort of out of Doug's hands as he doesn't even seem to own his own fucking character. But I really started to think about what would happen to the NC after Doug retires forever after watching this return special so many times. My hope is that the Nostalgia Critic becomes something like the Fred channel, meaning it's nothing at all resembling the original series and they just have a million random children ask kooky movie questions in the street that old hacks told them to ask because they think it's the best way to make a buck. I mean, like anything is possible at this point. In the long 12-year history of the Nostalgia Critic, not much feels more like the beginning of the end for the series than the review must go on, which is weird because it feels like this video has kind of escaped any and all criticism, at least from anything I've seen, and trust me, it deserves criticism. It's uncomfortable, unfunny, amateur, boring, meandering, unnecessary, egotistical, pretentious, full of itself, and for me, sad. Sad because I grew up on the Nostalgia Critic. Sad because I still have a soft spot in my heart for those early videos I watched and those early jokes. All of these jokes, all of his reviews played instrumental parts in my childhood, as well as a spark of an interest in older movies and film in general. But ever since the Nostalgia Critic was killed off and Doug brought him back, it's kind of felt like the end has been nigh. And I think we're finally starting to see that feeling come true. Let's just run down what's happened since this video has come out. The new cast was added to the Nostalgia Critic, which effectively combined demo reel with the NC and created a product that simply didn't have the heart the original did. The Not So Awesome documents came out, revealing a pattern of abuse and incompetence from the likes of Doug and Rob Walker, as well as Channel Awesome CEO Mike Machad, the owner of the Nostalgia Critic IP. All of the producers that were so vital to the site departed, leaving CA with the Nostalgia Critic and Brad Jones as the only two producers with somewhat well-known names. Probably, surprisingly, most controversially, and eye-openingly, at least the quality of his videos of all, Doug Walker released his review of The Wall. Received widespread criticism from the YouTube community, personalities, and consumers alike. The Wall really felt like a turning point, or maybe a steep last screeching break before hitting the stop sign in front of you and the way people viewed the Nostalgia Critic and consumed his content. I think this really was the last time the Nostalgia Critic had everybody's eyes on him, and it wasn't for good. That video was universally hated, and I think the reason why it has so many views in particular is because word got around about just how awful it was, and I think it led to some people who were still watching him just become completely fed up with him, leading to their exits as fans. And that feeling is reflected in Channel Awesome's views lately as well. Look, I'm not going to act like I get a ton of views on here and that I know what it takes to get as many views as possible. My last video maybe has 60 at the time of this recording. I don't mean to sound like an archfiend here. I'm just simply pointing out the fact that even a few years ago, Nostalgia Critic videos got well over a couple million views, and in 2020, at least when I check in every now and then, they struggle to get a couple 100,000. And it might not be fair to do this, but I have to compare him to his contemporary, James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd. AVGN videos still do obscenely well, and even his random videos, or videos that aren't the AVGN, do pretty well. The one I watched before all this, which was the Unexpected Deaths in Film video, had well over 150,000 reviews when I watched it, and compare that to the videos that CA posts, some of which are regular entries like Tomorrow Just Screamed, and the difference in popularity and engagement is alarming. Of course, every Nostalgia Critic is sponsored at the wazoo, so plenty of companies feel as if he's popular enough to stake their name on still. But just from a mere fan's perspective, it's obvious who the more likable, more consistently successful and engaging personality/channel is. I really don't want to be making this video. I really don't want to be here hating on Doug. I don't want to hate Doug. I loved his videos when I was younger. When the Not So Awesome documents came out, I didn't want the things about Doug to be true. But as the years have gone by, it's become more and more obvious that those claims about Doug are staked in a lot of truth. In 12 years, Doug has not grown as a filmmaker, reviewer, and seemingly even worse, as a person. And because of that, I simply cannot sit through his content anymore. I said earlier, I check in every now and then, but I do not last longer than 5 minutes the majority of the time. And if I do, it's because I'm mesmerized by the sheer lunacy of what's happening on the screen before me. Like Nostalgia, Doug and his character are deeply rooted in the past, and I'm sure for a lot of kids my age. But instead of being something worth remembering now, the Nostalgia Critic feels more and more like a memory, lost and forgotten in the past. And maybe that's where he belongs. I am Droopy, and I wrote this because I'm insane. I'm gonna go watch Red Letter Media.
Melvin, Melvin, brother of the Joker. Melvin, Melvin, brother of the Joker. Melvin, Melvin, brother of the Joker. I'm cool.